Sorry, yes, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We're going to get started because we're short on time and we have a long agenda. Chair does note the existence of a quorum, and I'm going to ask that the minutes reflect the names of the members who are present with us this morning. Let's start with, does anybody have a proposed change to the draft agenda that was circulated previously? Not here. Any changes? Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
I hear any opposition? I don't hear any opposition, so we will consider the agenda adopted by unanimous consent. Approval of the minutes, draft of the December minutes was circulated previously. Does anybody have any suggested or requested changes to the draft minutes from January's meeting?
Accept.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Do I hear any opposition to accepting these minutes as circulated? If not, we will consider the minutes adopted by unanimous consent. Now, today, we have Marlene Michelson, who is the executive director of our county council with us. She's asked some time to talk about one of the issues that we've been discussing, which is the provision of the charter that deals with executive appointments and the requirements for confirmation by the council for the non-merit positions that are appointed. I'm going to turn it over to her. I thank you very much. We're going to give her some time to talk, and then we will have some time afterwards for folks who have questions. So, Marlene, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to get to speak to the commission and share my views on this very important issue in my mind. And I want to start with just a little background on how we do hiring in the county. We have two different systems. We have a merit system, which is really based on hiring people with the right credentials for the position. So the merit system, there's a lengthy process, sometimes a frustratingly lengthy process, I'll admit, where we have to advertise, we have to do interviews. There's all these screenings to make sure that the right person is put in the right position, and that it's a very independent judgment done through our human resources. First, human resources does screening, and then the staff in the relevant department does its own screening, all kinds of requirements for how the interviews are conducted with panels, et cetera. In the non-merit system, we are giving the person doing the appointment the ability to select whoever they want. And the only check and balance as to whether this person has any qualifications, in my mind, is the public interview process. So when a candidate is interviewed in public by the 11 members of the council, what they are focusing on is, do you have the right background, experience, knowledge to do the job? If you take that away, then in my view, there is absolutely nothing to prevent a county executive. And I want to emphasize a future county executive. I am not making any comments about this county executive or his appointments, but a future county executive without interviews could take every position that is no longer subject to an interview process and say, anyone who worked on my political campaign gets a position. Doesn't matter if you have the right criteria. So the making sure someone's qualified, I think, is the most important thing. But I want to add that having a public interview process provides accountability, transparency. All of these interviews are shown live on the council's cable channel. They're streamed. Members of the public get to hear those interviews and have confidence that the people who are being appointed actually have the credentials for those jobs. And typically what we do in the council, our ideal scenario is we get a request for the county executive to appoint somebody, and approximately a week later, an interview is scheduled. And the reason for that week is the public becomes aware an interview will take place. It is put on the council's agenda, people are notified. And then after the interviews, we provide the public an opportunity once again to comment, and 1 week later, the person is appointed. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the data of what we've done over the past year at the end. But that is the ideal process. Now, you might say, well, these are not the directors we're talking about. They're lower level people. So why does that matter? And in my view, it's even more important because traditionally, the deputy directors have been the people who actually run the government. Some of you have heard that I strongly objected to having people in these deputy director positions move from non-merit or from merit to non-merit, because the deputy directors tend to be the people who have been in government a very long time, are really at the peak of their career. They know how to run the department, and they are the ones doing, the yeoman's work and being the direct managers of staff. So I personally objected to many of the, and I think it's been kind of, Kelly, help me with the numbers, but I feel like it's been like around 11 positions that have been changed from merit to non-merit. So a significant chunk of the government. What this county executive has done is taken the people who have tremendous experience and who I think are absolutely qualified and move them from merit to non-merit. And you might say, well, see, that's proof it works, except now they are non-merit. The very next county executive can come in and fire all of these people who have all the experience, who have been running government, and replace them with whoever he or she wants. That is a very scary scenario for me, and one that I'm hoping that we will avoid. So I want to talk a little bit also about the timing and what has happened. And we have heard an allegation that the reason for this is because the council takes a long time with appointments, and I have no idea what the basis for that is. We looked at the data for the past year, and there were 11 appointments made in the past year. And we, Kelly can get you all this data if you want it in more detailed form. 3 of them were interviewed the week after they came over and appointed the week after. So following exactly our 2-week time frame. In 3 cases, it took 3 weeks. And in some cases, it was that, the council was either not meeting or there was just some reason why the agenda was too full. So in 3 cases, it was 3 weeks. In one situation, it was submitted the week before the council went on winter recess. So it was impossible to do. And it was done immediately upon the end of the winter recess. And in cases where it is submitted before recess, the county executive is well aware of the council schedule. In fact, my liaisons, I always reach out to a month in advance of the recess and say, if there's anything you want us to approve now, you need to get it by this date. So they knew that. And then 4 were submitted on May 15th. And for those of you who don't know our budget schedule, May 15th, the council is doing budget all the time. It's in its final days of budget consideration. And in those cases, the executive knew and was told that the interviews would be conducted after budget. And so what happens is the council approves the budget. It goes on a 2-week recess. These people were interviewed either the first week back, and I think it was 2 were interviewed the first week back and 2 the following week, because interviewing 4 people, and these are usually an hour-long interview, was going to take up too much of the agenda. So what you see here is a situation in which council has done everything possible to try and move these through quickly. I will say the only times in my knowledge that appointments have been held up is when they come over and there is a big problem with the appointment. And there, our goal is to try and sort it out before bringing a person into a public interview process. If we know they're not going to be appointed, if there's something in their background or their experience that is problematic, and the majority of the council is saying, no way, this person has something they've done in the past or some critical lack of experience, then our goal is to say, this person does not have support. Let's not have a public interview process and embarrass them. There's no point to doing that, doing a public forum, pointing out that someone doesn't have an interview. That is very rare, that happens. Usually we do get very qualified candidates, I'm glad to say. So it's very rare that an interview is held up. And when it is held up, generally what we'll say to the executive is, we have concerns about this person. We've heard this, or we're worried about this qualification. Provide us with more information so that we can feel comfortable with the appointment. So those are the only situations in which there is a true delay. Kelly, is there anything that I've missed that you wanted to add here too, because you've done so much work on this issue?
No, I think you've covered it extensively. The only thing I might add is that in the last, when we had Bill, I believe it was 23-27, which was the most recent conversion, I think we did actually have, the council did receive an assurance from the county executive's office that that the council would be involved in the interview process.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned that. You know, as I noted, I was very concerned having positions such as deputy directors converted from merit to non-merit, because these people run the government and their credentials are essential. And when the council expressed concern about that, the response that was given was, well, but you're going to get to interview them and confirm them. And so you will have the opportunity to determine that they really are qualified for these key positions. And so now this proposal would remove that ability from the council and from the public as well. So what happens is you would have a very public, transparent interview process, and you would be converting that to one where an appointment could be made based on a county executive determination with absolutely no check balance or transparency as to whether this person had any qualifications for the position. And you know, take away all of that ability for us to determine that we're making sure that we have the right people to keep the county government running. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Yeah, are there any positions of those 60 positions that you would think that the county executive might have or should have the responsibility for making an appointment without having to go through the
Yeah, absolutely.
council?
The special assistants.
Special assistant.
Yes, so the county executive gets to hire, I believe it's 4 special assistants, and they are advisors to the county executive. In fact, they may very well be political advisors, and he is entitled to that. And if I recall, Kelly, help me with this, they may already be exempt from the interview process. But that is something we need to check. So in those situations, the county executive should have the ability to have some advisors that he or she picks based totally on the executive's personal preferences of someone who will support him in the role. So.
Okay. If those are on, I don't have the list in front of me, but if those are among the 60 or so non-merit positions that we're looking at, should there be some exception, some category of non-merit person that would distinguish between those that go before the council and those that don't?
Yes, absolutely. And I do think that may be the case, but since neither Kelly and I have the exact answer, we'll double check. And if it's not already the case, we can provide you with any change that might be necessary to make sure that that's clear.
I'll gather that information provided.
So let me ask, if somebody were to say, okay, we agree with all your positions and the charter should probably stay the same in terms of the confirmation process. And they said, but I think that there's probably some outside deadline. Maybe it's 45 days, maybe it's 60 days. There's some amount of time, you'd say, but after that amount of time, the council either has to take some action or it really should be considered to be a final appointment. And that action could be a deferral, even it could be confirmation, or it could be a rejection, or it could be a deferral. But some action, I mean, could you foresee like some outside number, whether it's 60 days or whatever you think is appropriate? Could you see doing that?
I can. I want to emphasize that the only situations in which that has happened is when there's a very seriously problematic nominee. And, you know, my sense has been that these are generally good people who may not be right for the role. I hate to see us having to take an action that embarrasses that person, but if you feel that that outside deadline is necessary so that there has to be a formal, you know, rejection or deferral, that's something we could do. The downside, as I said, is these are generally good people who may not be right for the job and don't deserve to be embarrassed by a public statement that they're not going to be nominated or accepted or confirmed by the council. So I'm not sure that there's a real benefit to that, but
Well,
I don't feel strongly. So
couldn't we imagine a difference in opinion between the council and the executive as to who is and who isn't qualified, and therefore a standoff that leaves deadlock and just unending? I mean, we see that at the federal level all the time.
yeah, that probably is the case at the federal level. To my knowledge, it has never happened at the council, and the council has given great deference to the county executive to set up a government that he or she believes is, you know, going to do the job. And so if you look back historically at the very few nominees that have not been approved, it's very limited. And it would be very clear to anyone, and we can even provide we can provide you the exact situations in which that happened, that this person really should not be in the job, including, and you know, one situation in which the person was actually interviewed saying he was leaving his existing job because he had to work too hard. And then later followed it up with, I'm sorry, the reason I shouldn't have said I have to work too hard. The problem is that I'm not really good at management and I don't delegate enough. And by the end of that interview, everyone was like, what? So, you know, there are examples that are just so clear. It has never been a sort of political standoff of who you like better. And you know, right now the politics in the county, they, you know, all of our elected officials are currently have very similar political positions. So we don't have some of the issues that you have at the federal government.
But you would know that probably within a week or two after the nomination comes before the council, right? That the person has some problems.
Yes, absolutely. And the first thing we do is ask county executive for more information, or, you know, try and do our own due diligence. And, you know, we have a recent potential nominee where, and I won't get into the details, but the union said the rank and file hate this person and do not trust this person and will not respond well to this person. And so the council said, we need to do some due diligence. We need to hear more about this. We need to ask the county executive whether he had heard this information and how he's responding to it. So that could be a matter of weeks to try and sort out when you have, you know, allegations against a candidate. So,
Marlene, did I miss something, or did you indicate that the HR department is engaged in the pre-review process as it would on merit?
no, absolutely not. They have nothing to do with it. I mean, right now, a county executive, if it's non-merit and there is no interview process, they can be walking down the street and saying, you look nice. I think I'd like to hire you. There'd really be no screening whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Would that screening be built into the process?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
could some level of screening be built into the process? I
Um,
assume that for a merit position that you do some types of checks on whether the person has a criminal background, perhaps look at their credit history or whatever else. Could you tell us a little bit more about what kind of screening you do for the merit positions?
Right, so in a merit position, there are both mandatory qualifications and preferred qualifications. And our HR department is looking at those qualifications. So for example, if I'm hiring an attorney for the county council, there will be a requirement, obviously, for a law degree, for a certain number of years practicing law that is related to local government. It may include in the qualifications drafting legislation, which is something our attorneys do all the time. I cannot hire an attorney who has no local government experience. And with non-merit positions, I guess the good and the bad is you do have the ability for the person doing the appointment to say, here's what's most important to me personally. And in the example, if it was a non-merit attorney, something we don't have, but if it were a non-merit attorney, they might say, I really don't care about drafting legislation. As a council member or as a county executive, I've decided new legislation is not really important, but I think there's a lot of pending lawsuits coming up. And so I'm just going to go for somebody who has argued in court. I've decided that's going to be the legacy of my administration is challenges on, I don't know, opioid drugs or something else. The merit gives the ability to, or what qualifications are to me. It's an objective standard our HR department will be responsible for looking at. And so if you come up with criteria that are looked at independently, then yes, you're right. You get rid of a lot of the concerns I have, but you take away the flexibility of the elected official to determine their own priorities, which could change from administration to administration.
You talked a bit about the process of getting someone into a position. Is there a level of difficulty that's different for non-merit positions in terms of firing someone, in essence?
Absolutely. If it's a non-merit position, somebody could be fired without cause. If it's a merit position, you have to document cause for firing someone. And I'll note that, the current situation with the interviews and the confirmation by the county council still allows the county executive to fire someone he does not believe is doing a good job or serving his or her needs appropriately. And I think I don't object to having some flexibility. I go back to my concern about these deputy positions who have been in these positions for a very long time. They're really at the pinnacle of their career in terms of experience and knowledge. And I am concerned about the county executive's ability to fire those positions without cause. But I don't think that's the issue before you today, because no one's suggesting that we change the manner in which non-merit positions can be fired. We're just talking about the hiring process and the interview process. So the county executive would still have that ability to fire people.
Well, I'm still, my curiosity relates to whether the council has any say in whether non-merit position individuals should be fired. If the council is extremely dissatisfied with the performance of a non-merit person, have they any sway in causing that person to leave that job?
Not in the formal sense. I think you mean informally. They can convey to the county executive, as they have in some situations, this person is not serving you well. You, county executive, should think about releasing them. The only position where the council has a role is the county attorney. And based on our former county attorney, we changed the rules to say that a county executive cannot fire the county attorney without some input from the county council. The council can't do it on its own, but what we wanted to make sure was that the county attorney would be in a position of giving good, unbiased advice to both the council and the executive, because the county attorney serves the council and the executive. And sometimes the council and executive don't agree on a legislative matter. And we wanted to make sure that the county attorney would always give unbiased advice to all parties. And as I said, the former county attorney, right after leaving office, said that county attorneys are hired and fired by the county executive, and that puts undue pressure on them in how they provide advice, and to make sure that a county attorney never in the future felt pressure to support a position because their boss, the county executive, could fire them. It has a new provision that says the council must be brought into that decision.
You mentioned that the county executive has special assistants. Do any of the department heads have special assistants or any mayor position, non-mayor positions which are equivalent to a chief of staff?
They do have chiefs of staff, and I'm sorry, they do have chiefs of divisions, not chiefs of staff. So in some departments, we have deputy directors. Under the deputy directors in the larger departments, there are different divisions, and chief is frequently the term used to head the division. They don't have a chief of staff per se, but I think the deputies and the chiefs are helping fulfill that role.
And
But-
are those chiefs then generally merit positions?
So Kondakilli, I know you have the full list of the non-merit positions. I believe that in the police department, some chiefs are non-merit. I don't remember whether any other departments have chiefs that are non-merit, but do you know that information offhand?
Not offhand, and I can pull that up and circulate it later. I did want to circle back with the chair's permission to the question of which assistants in section 2-26 of the code lists the following positions in the office of the county executive are non-merit. 5 directors of the regional services centers, director, Office of Community Partnerships, director of strategic partnerships, 4 assistant chief administrative officers, 2 special projects managers, and the chief labor relations officer. Those are all non-merit.
So, we do have a long agenda. I'm going to suggest maybe we have time for one more question. If there's one more question, and I'm going to give it to Howard.
Well, Marlene, it's not really a question, but I just want to thank you for your many years of great dedicated service to Montgomery County. We heard that you're retiring.
I'm really trying.
And but you were always great to work with, very responsive to the council members, the staff, to the community in every way. So I just want to thank you for your service and dedication to the county.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that from you.
And thank you so much for appearing here today. I know this was a little bit of an inconvenience for you. You're out of town, and I see you took your work clothes with you just for this occasion. So thank you very
My
much.
pleasure. This is I am on a ski vacation in Colorado. So you can see how important this issue is, that I got up 2 hours before your meeting started at 6 a.m. To be here and to talk to you. And I'm glad for the time and hope you'll consider this issue very carefully.
Thank you, and you're welcome. You're certainly welcome to submit anything you want in writing as well, if we haven't covered something to think of later. So,
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
bye.
Nice.
All right, we're going to move on to the part of our agenda where we go through our various topics. And the way I thought about this when I was putting the agenda together was that we, at our last meeting for each of the topics, we sort of tried to focus on what don't we know yet? What questions haven't we answered yet? And so I'd like to go through these one at a time and just see if we have, since our last meeting, any answers to any answers to previously unanswered questions or any new information. And then after we give that opportunity on each of the topics to just get a sense of a consensus or a sense of the group through some sort of a straw poll as to whether most of us favor including that on our public session, our public information session agenda, or whether most of us would rather move on and not have a public information session on that topic. We're not going to take formal votes that are recorded by person, but we will get a sense if there are more than half of us who just don't want the topic to move forward.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
Group 2, the staggered elections, through your research, I think we could dispose of that pretty quickly.
I think
Can
so
we, can we
too.
talk about that first?
Actually, I wanted to talk about Marlene's subject first because now that she's finished and it's all fresh in our mind, I think we'll just get through that one really quickly and then
Okay.
I think that's the only reason I put it first.
Thank you.
And I just, one other thing to keep in mind is we don't need to be committed to either pro or con on whether the charter change should be made in order to put it on the public agenda. I think we should have some consideration for the fact that in some of these topics, we have been specifically asked by our county executive to consider it. And I think at least one or two cases, we've been specifically asked by one or two council presidents to consider it. And I think we should give some significant weight to that in deciding whether they're worthy of having public addresses on those topics, whether we feel personally strong about the topics or not. So let's go to the issue of appointments of non-merit positions that we just finished discussing with Marlene. Do we have unanswered questions from last month that we now are prepared to answer, or do we have new information? I forget who did the presentation last month.
Yeah, I did.
You.
I mostly did it. It was very helpful talking to Marlene. We had talked to her by a telephone conference, a couple of weeks before this, but she added some more detail to it. What struck me was that of the 11, she gave us some statistics from the last year. 11 appointments, if I understand, if I heard her right, 11 appointments made over the last 12 months. Most of them, about 60% of them, fell within 2 weeks or so. There was one that was submitted before the recess. It was taken up right after the recess. So my guess, she didn't, there wasn't a specific day, time frame, day, specific number of days, but it sounded like it was within, say, 30 days or so. There were 4 that were delayed due to the budget process, but those were taken up pretty quickly after the budget. So I'm assuming it's 30 or 45 days, something like that. So, and she was somewhat, based upon Jim's question to her about a time frame or time clock, if you will, for the appointments, she seemed to be open to that. Certainly the executive was open to that. So I think if we had something like a 45 to 60 day time clock based upon her discussion, her feedback today, the information she provided today, I think that would fit with most of the appointments, at least over the last year, would fit within that time clock without an issue. So that was helpful to me. The other part of it where the council needs to be involved in the non-merit positions, I think she felt pretty strongly, at least in a conversation we had before with her, and then today, she feels that the council should be involved in vetting, if you will, the non-merit positions.
So let me ask, get a sense, do we have anybody or anybody's plural who feel this is a topic that should not go forward to the public agenda for their information session? Is there anybody who really thinks it doesn't belong there? Okay, not seeing any objections. We will leave this topic on for our public information sessions. Does everybody have a copy of what I call a working draft of what might be our announcement for the public information sessions? There's a description there, and I guess I'd like to ask now if anybody has any proposed significant changes to that. And we're not going to wordsmith the document, but is there anything you can think of that should be in this announcement about that topic that somehow is omitted without trying to capture specific wording?
I confess that I did not read it. but I
Okay, well,
did
there'll be time. We'll take comments on the document before we issue it. But I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Before we go on can we go around the table and get some feedback of what people think about, the issue on the table? That is the non-merit positions?
What I'm trying to avoid is taking a vote. And that
Yeah,
gives,
but-
but I'm glad to hear it. I mean, people are welcome.
I think my opinion about this, since I wrote it and I was listening to the executive, is I feel fairly strongly that there should be a time clock. Other counties have done it. I think it, makes sure that some of the critical positions, I mean, there's something like, for an example, the police chief position needs to be refilled. And that's a non-merit position, as I understand it. The public schools, the superintendent of school, that position needs to be filled. I'm not sure. That's probably a separate process, but throughout the year, positions become vacant, and the executive has to run a multi-billion-dollar operation with 30,000 people. He needs some flexibility in hiring, these non-merit positions, and going to the council is a roadblock. I mean, it could be a roadblock, and I mean, there's different ways to look at this. And there's certainly some overlap in the hiring and the vetting process. And process. So anyway, to make
We have one vote in favor of a time clock.
right, and okay,
All
right.
right, and I will tell you, my personal view is, I think it sort of feels to me a little bit like a solution in search of a problem, because I don't get any sense that we have any problem. And I also get a sense that if we were to impose a time clock, it's only going to come up in situations where there is a serious problem to resolve. It's only going to, that clock's only going to be triggered in the rare situation where you have a question about credentials, and then you're not letting them resolve it in a way that's best suited to their circumstances. You're resolving it on an artificial clock. And I think what the council would probably do if I was on the council is just, they would just erase the clock by saying, well, we're not going to oppose it. We're not going to accept it. We're going to defer it to a later time. And then informally go get that person to withdraw. And so I think that it's sort of, it's not, I won't say it's a no-win situation. I just don't think it's going to have the intended effect. And since we haven't had a problem with it, I just don't see that. But that's just a personal view at this point. I'm open to, hearing from the public too. Anybody else have an opinion they want to express since we've taken opposite views? We could.
No, I think just let it be something that the public can comment.
Yeah, Jim, this is Dylan. I think that those are two valid and appropriate positions, and that this is something that council member and the executive feel strongly about. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to us for us to be deeply in, get really into the issue, and putting it on our agenda serves that purpose. I think it would be disrespectful if it took it off the agenda before doing any of the public outreach, just given that we were asked to put it on the, put it on the table. So I think that this one is one that should stay. That's me not speaking to the issue, but speaking to whether or not it should stay on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're in a good.
I agree.
Thank you.
I concur, yes.
Okay,
So it's still on the table.
it's still on the table. And I think it belongs on the table. So, okay, let's move on to the next topic, which I have is the direct election of council president. and the term of the president, and refresh my memory on who presented it last time.
That was me.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't remember those things.
Yeah, of course. Shall I, can I?
Go ahead,
give a summary?
and anything we know that's new, answered, unanswered questions or new information.
Yeah, well, the new information actually had to do with staggered elections. So in many of the options in talking about expanding the term of the role of council president, we talked about a 2-year term that would be directly elected by the voters. But if we're not having staggered elections, then perhaps a 2-year term directly elected by the voters is not optimal, or maybe we would need more research into elections law to find out if we could do that.
I guess with the 2-year terms, I might have been perceiving the discussion a little different last time, which is I thought that most of the discussion about 2-year terms was not about elected 2-year terms. I thought mostly we were talking about appointed 2-year terms.
We explored every option, including that. So I think that one should probably fall away. We explored in whether or not the position should be directly elected by the voters. We explored whether or not it should remain as is, and all of the hybrids. We came up with, I believe, 7. I apologize for probably a copy error on my part earlier. Because Dylan, as Dylan pointed out, yeah, there was some duplication to an earlier form. Do you want me to run through all of those options that we discussed? Okay, and the first, the county charter remains unamended because county council holds the keys to this. The reason why the president of the council is elected every single year is actually it's found in a rule of procedure for the county council. The county council can amend that, but the county council has not amended that. And so they have asked for assistance. This issue has been raised at least 3 times in the history of the Charter Review Commission. And so perhaps it is time to address it with a more durable solution. In the second, or that is not not taking a poll, but just informing you of the history and of the arguments. In the second option, the county charter is amended to provide a 2-year term for the position, where the president is elected as it is now, but it's now in the charter that the role of council president will be elected from among the members. Then the third option is, should we take, or should there be an at-large council member directly elected by the voters to be president? It is contrary to Maryland law to have the same candidate on the ballot for 2 positions. So we can't have a candidate for council president and a candidate for at-large member and let them choose between the 2. A compromise is to have a council member running for the position of president of the council, and they can decline or resign that position, at which point another person comes in. Now we're starting to wade into more complex territory. There's also the option of direct election of a separate position of council president for 4 years. There are some arguments for and against that. I can go into those. And then there's a hybrid approach where the council president is elected to serve a term or to serve in the position for 2 years. The county council, did I say that right? So the incoming president would be elected directly by the voters for a term of 2 years. The county council, in their normal election or selection cycle, would choose the vice president. And the vice president would then become the county council president after 2 years. So there we have the voice of the voters combined with the feelings and the working collaboration of the county council. And then there is a final option that takes all of the politics completely out of that, and it's just an automatic rotation every year among council members. You can go by number district, and then when you get to at-large members, it can go according to vote count.
I look forward to see how you write that up in our report.
Yeah.
So, what I think, what I want to ask now is, so we're going to have an agenda for our public information sessions. And I perceive that there are 2 issues maybe to lay before the public. I don't think that we can handle that many different options at the hearing, but I think I view this as one question as to whether we should have the public directly elect a president. And the second question is, what should the term of that president be? Should our president's, whether it's direct election or appointment, however it is, should the president's term be 1 year, 2 year, or 4 years? Does that make sense?
That's a brilliant summary.
I don't know about that. How do folks feel? There's some consensus on it, or is there disagreement?
I think we need to, in some fashion, indicate that we believe it should be in the charter.
No,
I
I do agree with that as well, that there's a third question or sub question there is as to whether or not this is a charter change. Because it directs what will happen in future councils, or whether
Right, as opposed to the next council coming and saying, we like it better
as
the other
opposed to saying
way.
that let each council decide for itself. It will decide, by legislation or by rule this
Right.
time, and then the next council will decide again by legislation. or rule. I agree that should be earmarked somehow in our presentation of the questions, yes.
Right.
And I will admit that the working draft certainly didn't do that, and then I penned it in myself that I agree that it's something we should do.
Is there any chance we could get a sense of the commission whether we're leaning towards like a 2-year term? We heard from Andrew and we heard from, others, I think, that a 2-year term for the council president makes sense.
So let's do it this way without taking wrong. The question about direct election, I have not sensed in the room, two meetings in a row, a groundswell of support for having direct election of a president, but it's been raised now by 2 of our council presidents, and I personally think it's worthy of putting on our agenda, even though out of respect for their request I think they would like to hear public opinions. And I think we should probably hear the public opinions, whether or not we personally support it or not. But is there any consensus that we should not have the direct election of the president on the agenda?
Can put it on the agenda, but if you get a number of activists coming in who are all in favor of that, is that going to mean that we should then say that that's what should be on the
That's
ballot?
democracy in action. We get that's the joy of being this commission. We're not elected. We could say whatever we like, even if we disagree with the people who testify. So
Right.
I don't feel there's public pressure to write a report that agrees with the people who testify at the hearing. So
That's fine.
that's it. That each
Let
person.
them say their say. Yeah, let them say their
Yeah.
say then.
Okay.
I do have one question on clarification. This is Cece.
Sure.
I think we should streamline the question if we're asking the public to input on it. I think if you leave too many options out there, you're going to confuse the conversation. So I think we should say, hey, we want public opinion on whether the council president should be directly elected or continue to be chosen by a council of their peers, and not get into the 1 year, 2 year, 4 year things, because that generates too many tangential questions.
I do agree. I think, and I did try to streamline it down to 2 sentences in the draft announcement. The only risk is if the obvious answer is, no, we don't want a direct election of the president, we don't want to create that power center, then it does sort of beg the question of, are we happy with the current system, or do we really think there's something to address there, whether it's by legislation, council rule, charter, whatever it is. There is some consensus that the 1 year doesn't really work very well, and that they ought to consider something more than that, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, whatever. So it leaves open the question of, without trying to direct what that process is and what that number is, there is another question there. Do you not
Yes.
agree?
Yes, absolutely. I personally think the 1 year is a little, I don't think ridiculous is the word we want to use here, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Okay. So I'm getting the sense there is consensus with it, that we'll leave both of those topics on. We'll recognize that when it comes down to picking the term, there are a couple ways that could go. There are options as to whether it's charter change or council change, and let the public sort of weigh in on that, and those topics will be on the agenda.
I
Works
think
for
it's
me.
important to remember that the position is mostly ceremonial, that the person doesn't really have a strong policy driving role, that they're in charge of much, really.
If you direct elect them, though, that'll change.
Yes, yeah, they'll have to campaign on something.
Yep.
As opposed to campaigning for representing the major issues of the district that represents. They would have to try to say that, whatever it is that they want, either in opposition to the county executive or potentially in support of some major policy initiative. County executive, but I think that the mixing those two things is not a good idea. We really just need to let the public state their opinions on the matter and whatever they have to say.
All right, so let's move on to I think the one question we haven't quite touched on yet, but Mike raised earlier, which is the issue of staggered elections, which I perceive is just not worth pursuing at this point, since it's a Maryland constitutional issue. Anybody have a different view as to why we want to hear from the public? Because I will tell you, there is an option we have, which is to point out that, look, this is not an issue for this charter commission. This is not an issue of charter. It's not an issue of council legislation. It is an issue we care about, and we have, an opinion on. It's just, we could take the view that we urge our elected officials and the council and executive to talk to their colleagues in the Annapolis, in the General Assembly, and request that they work on this, because we think it's something that makes sense. The constitutional provision is quite old, and there's a reason why they wanted all the elections at one time. But if it's something we feel strong about, we could push it forward in a recommendation of lobbying type recommendation. So
I'd stay away from it.
Yeah, this is Dylan Pressman. I recommend this isn't on our agenda. It's not something we can act on, and it's our agenda for things that we can act on, not general interest things.
Dylan, I had a little trouble hearing you. Just want to be.
Oh, sorry. I said, this is Dylan Pressman. I recommend we keep this off. We do not include this on our agenda. It's our agenda for things that we can act on, and we want to hear from the public on things that we can act on. There are always going to be issues that we're interested in, we think the legislature should take up, but that's a different meeting.
Okay. Several opinions said keep it off. I personally agree with that. Do we have any large group of people who think they would like to hear public talk on this topic? Not seeing anybody requesting that. We will consider this topic not part of our public information session. Sorry.
Hey, this is Cece.
Hi.
So if I understood your email correctly, this is an issue that has to be addressed by the legislative body first And then after they vote, then it will come back to the Charter Commission. Is that correct?
It is, insofar as the presumption is, if they change the Constitution, they could change the Constitution to say it's up to the council to decide if they want to stagger elections, and it would push it back to us. Or they could write the Constitution, to say, to push it to us. It's up to it's up to the council, but the council has to do it through a charter change. So it would depend on how they write the Constitution, whether they give it back to the council as a power to write a special elections law, or whether they give it back to the council to say yes, but only through charter change. So it could happen either way, I think.
Okay.
There is another issue I want to raise because I had the opportunity to hear from our council president Friedson in the last week or so. And he raised this with me. It was a topic he raised with us when he met with us. And there wasn't a lot of discussion at this table by it. I don't think our members were all that invested in the issue, but I'm going to raise it because he wanted to update me on where he stood on the issue to clarify. When he was here, he talked about the idea of special elections to fill vacancies. The law in this area is a little complicated because what it basically says is council appoints people to fill vacancies either in the council or the executive unless the council enacts a special election law. And we didn't talk about it at the time, but in fact, our council has enacted a special election law. So there is a special election law on the books. The council's law says we have special elections to fill those vacancies unless they occur in the last 12 months of the 4-year term. And by that time, we're already into the election of the new council and the new executive anyway. And so there would be no special election if it came up in those last 12 months, in which case it would fall back to the provision in our charter, which says the council will appoint to fill the vacancy. And in the case of the executive, the chief administrative officer is the acting executive until they make that appointment, but the council will appoint people to fill either the vacancy on the council or the county executive's seat. And then it says, if the council doesn't do it in the required time, and I forget whether it's 30 or 45 days, if the council fails to do it or just can't do it or doesn't have a majority or consensus, then in the case of the county council, the executive will fill it. But the executive has to fill it with the person who is given to him by the elected central committee of the party of whoever was holding the office. And so the elected central committee members would tell the executive who their person is for their party. If it's the executive, obviously that can't happen. They can't get, but so it would be the elected central committee members who would then make that choice. Andrew said to me, he said, this is an issue I care about and we're thinking about it. He said, we're looking at that as a potential bill for the council to introduce. He said, we're working on it. He said, I can't give you any details right now. We're just looking into it. He said, he has some thoughts about not going to the level below the council. If the council doesn't make the appointment of an executive, not letting the central committees do it, just letting the chief administrative officer continue to be the acting. He said, but they're working on it. And so the question is whether this is a topic we want to have anybody weigh in on at our listening sessions, or whether we ought to just leave this one go, see what the council legislation is after they introduce it, see where they're going with it. It's really up to them. Even if we recommend something in the charter, it's still going to be up to them. I think we should just let it go and see what they do legislation wise before we wade into it. But if the folks feel strongly that it's something they want to raise at a public hearing, you do have that option.
No, Jim, I think because you've mentioned that they're weighing in on it or discussing it significantly, that it is something that we would want to, wait to see exactly where they come out on this.
Yeah, I concur with that and with you, Jim, that this doesn't belong on our agenda. It's already on their agenda and they can drive that discussion.
Yeah, our job isn't to do their job for them. If you feel that strongly about it, then do something. That's why we elect you and pay you the big bucks.
I concur in that. Do we have anybody who feels differently, strongly, that want to make their argument?
No, I was being a little bit outside the box in my thinking that if we had ranked choice voting as opposed to the system we currently use now, that if a vacancy occurred in a position in the council, that the person who got the next highest number of votes would be automatically in essence, elected
I'll
to
grant you,
the
that's outside the
position.
box. That's very outside the box. I'll give you credit on that. So the reason I don't want to talk about ranked choice is because it's been determined many times that this body can't, that's a state law issue, and it would have to be done by Indianapolis. There's nothing we could do about that locally.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of people are very interested in ranked choice voting. It's not a local issue. And I wouldn't even want to contemplate the idea of putting somebody in the office automatically based on a vote that happened 3 years ago. So I'll let that one go. Okay, I think we have our consensus for how we want the public agenda to be for the listening session on this issue. That puts us to our last question, and we are exactly on time. I'm just amazed.
It's you. It's you.
It's me.
You get credit for that.
Okay. I'll take it, I guess. Budgets. I'm gonna let Mike kick it off about any new information, unanswered questions that we can now answer. And let us know where you want to go with this discussion before we decide what goes on our public agenda.
Okay, I don't think there's any new information. Dylan?
No, I don't think there's any new information.
We did have a nice conversation.
Oh, yeah, I think, do you want to report on the conversation with Craig, our budgeter?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
We had a Zoom interview with the deputy director of budget and got his views on the issues of changing from a hard number of votes to a 2/3 vote for making decisions about the budget, where there were three different votes outlined in section 305 of the charter. One where the budget has to be increased, that the increase that's proposed and going to be voted on the budget exceeds the increase in the consumer price index. And if that occurs, then 7 members of the council have to approve it, an increase in the budget in that case. There's also the possibility that the increase in the budget would exceed the county's council's decision about the affordability guidance. That would be in effect for the year. And that if the county executive presents a budget that exceeds that, and they're going to, in essence, approve it, that they would require 8 votes. And if there's no change in the budget, really, but the county council decides to make a change in the tax rate for personal property or for real estate. If there's a change in the weighted average of the ad valorem tax for homes, apartment buildings and so on, even if it's minuscule, that they require a unanimous vote of the council. And that could occur even though there's no change in the budget. That the budget could be flat from one year to the next. But if they determine that they have to make a change in the way that money is received, that the sales tax doesn't generate enough, or that the income tax doesn't generate enough, or the other fees and taxes that the county assesses don't raise enough money, there has to be some change in the property tax. That would require a unanimous vote. And so we had been thinking, recommending that in each case, that the vote should just be 2/3 of the council. And it was pretty much,
I guess supportive of.
slightly supportive, but it, you know, he didn't have a strong opinion one way or another, really.
Right, the arguments for, making the different voting levels, consistent. And making them 2/3 versus a hard number, are, maybe persuasive is too strong a word, but it's certainly logical. And it certainly simplifies, some of the work that he does, because he has to keep track of, does this, change in the budget, require 7 votes versus 8 votes versus unanimous? And so if it was all consistent, all 3 parts of the, of section 305, if they're all consistent and they're all 2/3, a fraction versus a specific number, if something changes, like the council goes from 11 to 13, or some other, or goes back down to 9, 2/3, it would not have to change the number from 7 to 6, whatever. So there's something to be said for a simpler way of determining whether a vote for the budget, for expenses, or for revenues, is simplified. And I think he, you know, would make his job perhaps a little bit easier.
He characterized that the county staff, council staff, had to spend quite a bit of effort going through the charter and the code to recognize the effect of the increase from 9 to 11, where certain things were based on 9 members, and then having to make revisions to recognize the fact that there are now 11 council members, and that the using 2/3 would eliminate at least some of that effort. But that effect only happens on those rare occasions when you actually change the number of people on the council. The other way that it has some slight advantage is that if there is a vacancy, or potentially 2 vacancies on the council, that the 2/3 applies to the current sitting members, that the vacancies don't impede reaching the number of votes. If you have 11 people on the council, but 2 are in quarantine for COVID, and you have to have 8 votes, and you just can't get there because those 2 folks aren't available, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Now the question is an interesting question. This is kind of for you, in a way, and staff. Any recommendation that the commission that we should consider should be an improvement to the way the governing process works in Montgomery County.
Hope so.
Hopefully, but also it's going to take quite some effort, you know, and so even if it does move the ball a little bit, in other words, making it 2/3 does simplify things. There doesn't seem to be, you asked Craig, based upon his knowledge, was there any reason it's 8 or 7 or, and he didn't know. And I think if you go back, it maybe is just, somebody one time figured 7 for one and then 8 for the other, but there wasn't any logic to it. So anyway, to make the long story short, if we made these voting levels consistent, it would simplify the process, perhaps improve it because it's easier to explain to people that if you make a change in the expenses, it's a 2/3 vote, and if you make a change in the commensurate revenues to pay for those expenses, is a 2/3 vote. So anyway, But it's gonna take some effort to get that done. You know, we're gonna have to make a recommendation. The council's gonna have to approve, it's gonna have to go in the charter. We're gonna have to, go into a referendum.
And that would be true of anything we would recommend from this committee.
So I guess the question before us is this worth making a recommendation? Is it gonna be worth the effort?
So,
That's,
And he also pointed out, I have a clear recollection of the a few years ago when the issue was offered as a referendum, voted on to increase the voting requirement for property tax changes to unanimous. And there'd be a bit of a buzzsaw in trying to make a change there, even though the public didn't realize at the time that there are different classes of property which are taxed at different rates. And that you could conceivably raise the tax on business property, lower the tax on income on personal homes. And you're goring someone's ox, but you're making someone else happy by making a change in the tax rates, but weighted average is unchanged. That the total revenue from that change could be a wash. But you're still making changes in the tax code. But you would, and in that case, you don't need a unanimous vote to do it. It's only if the overall effect is in some way an increase.
yeah, I see. I was initially, just like if you can indulge me a couple of, say, 60 more seconds. Initially, I was intellectually resistant to the idea of changing it from unanimous down to 2/3. We had a dinner and Dylan and David and I talked about it, and David suggested the 2/3. So the more I think about it, it does enable people who are the council members on the board, for that, say, 1/3 of the board who doesn't agree with changing the tax rate, to have a minority opinion. And I think people, residents in the county would benefit from minority opinions about, public, perhaps, minority opinions about whether this change makes sense or not. So kind of forcing the board to unanimously approve a tax rate increase. And so it's either all or nothing, the entire board or not, to have that daylight, the 1/3 being able to speak their mind, and yet the tax rate to pass. I think that would be a benefit to the county. And it might be something I'm thinking out loud, but this could possibly be an argument for those in the county who really are adamantly opposed to changing unanimous to something else, to maybe rethink the idea of it might be more politically acceptable to reduce it from unanimous to 2/3, to allow that 1/3 the voice to be heard.
well, I think this is, we've spent a fair amount of time on this, and our work group has spent a fair amount of time working on it. I think it's a topic that is worth listening to the public on. I do understand your point about, in the long run, someone says, is this change significant enough that's worthy of the public process that's involved in changing your charter? That it might be viewed by the public as a really insignificant thing, and we don't understand it. It's complex. Why is this on the ballot? Why am I voting on this? And I get it. It's not always easy from a political process, because these are pretty technical things sometimes. But I certainly think it's worthy of having a discussion. I do think, though, we should be prepared, if we have a public discussion on it, for as many good arguments as we could make about how this improves the process of government, how this seems like it makes for a more effective budget process, and that everything will work better, and it brings certain values to the table. all of that aside, I think we should be prepared that the public reaction might be as simple as, are you making it easier or harder for my taxes to increase? That's all I care about. Am I going to pay more next year or not? And you made it easier, go away. So I think you have to accept that while we're looking at it from all angles, there will be people who will come there and say, that's all I want to know is, am I going to pay more next year because of what you just did? So as long as you accept that the public opinion may not be anywhere near what you want to expect it to be, I think it's time to go forward.
We're making it harder to raise, either the CPI or the affordability index.
Well, the other part of that is this scope. We're only talking about making this change in relation to voting on the budget. Where else in the charter are there votes that require a supermajority? And why aren't we addressing all of those other places where we have to have 8 or 9 or whatever, as opposed to imposing 2/3 across the entire charter? And that this, I think the scope would be an easier argument to make, that we're just gonna, throughout the charter, if we require 7 or 8 or 9, that we're gonna just change all of those to 2/3. And that way, if the council gets bigger, it's easy. If there's a vacancy, it's easy across the board, not just when we're talking budget. And I don't know how many other places in the charter there is a requirement for a supermajority on an issue. I would suggest that might be a good idea for us to look for that and see how broad we can make the argument to make it more sellable to people. In which case, the objections would come from folks who realize, oh, wait, you're going to make it non-unanimous for tax changes.
Yeah, I think I did a scan of the charter, and there's less than 15 places where there's a specific vote. Yeah,
So
that's an interesting thought, but it comes up mostly in the budget process.
I
So
understand,
this is Dylan. The question on the table right now is whether or not it should be on our agenda. I think David's point is a good one, and something that we certainly can look into in between when the public agenda is published and when we actually decide what our recommendation is going to look like. But given that the issue is whether or not this should be on the agenda for that public meeting, I haven't heard anybody speak negatively to that. So I suggest that may be relatively consensus unless anyone wants to speak up now.
That's a great idea. Do we have anybody who's opposed to putting this on the agenda? Not hearing any objection, we will consider this on the agenda. So let me ask all of you to take a look at the way this issue was teed up in the announcement. This is the most complex issue I think we're going to be discussing in terms of the ability to explain to the public how it works. I tried to draft this in a way that made it simple, but you may not think it's very simple. You may not think it's good enough, but please take a look at it, because I'm going to ask you all to send me suggested changes, revisions, adjustments, whatever, to make it better. And I tried to draft this in a way that reflect what I thought I heard our budget director, Greg, tell us the other day. And Anna Keeley was on the phone, and you two folks are on the phone, so you may have heard something different than what I heard. Well, let's go through this, but not here, obviously, but take some time in the next couple of days to look at this and send suggestions for how to make this more understandable for the public who has to give us their opinion.
And Jim, I'm just sharing it on the screen
Oh,
so that
okay.
everybody can
Well,
see
yeah,
right
and
now.
it's 3 or 4 paragraphs, so I wouldn't try to wordsmith it here today with our time constraints.
Jim, this is Marvin. Is there a part of this proposal that's been put forth about the financial aspect? Is there something that's troublesome to you that we need to look at more carefully?
Not to me.
Okay.
I tried to, and the other thing is, my eye in looking at this was stating the question in the most neutral way possible, So it did not suggest that we had predetermined the answer.
Okay, okay.
That was my main concern, is that the public not get the perception that they were wasting their time commenting.
Okay. I understand that. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
All right, I think we're in a really good place. We're right on time, and let's. Go
Can I
ahead.
just, Craig Howard, who this group met with, he's the deputy director of the council. He's he's Marlene's deputy. Just, I know we've referred to him as the director of budgets, and so he's the deputy director of the council.
Oh, very helpful.
Yes, it was. That was a very pleasant interview.
Personable guy.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Let's talk a little bit about the details of the public listings issue in the few minutes we have left. I've circulated the draft, and please send your comments or suggestions on that in the next few days. I'd like to get some staff update on the locations and times and dates. And I did figure that we're going to do this in time to get the input before we meet next March and vote. It looks like our last opportunity is really March 4th, that week of March 4th through 8th. And if we can get this announcement out by, let's say, next Monday or Tuesday, it'll be about a 2-week notice period, which seems to be reasonable and fair. So that's where I think we are. Where do we stand in terms of location availability?
Sure. So good news on the location is we should be able to do it in the county office building. They are in the midst of their budget coming in March, so it gets a little dicey around scheduling because they're in committee all the time. But it looks like either the 6th or the 8th, there will be availability to host a listening session here, either in the main council room on the 3rd floor or in the 7th floor committee room. And that would allow for both in-person and virtual, kind of like the public hearings are done.
In either place, we can do it that way.
Positive on the 3rd floor. I'm almost positive on the 7th floor that they'll be able to do that. I'm working with the communications on that as well.
What time or
Be 2 to 3:30, I think, in the afternoon, correct, Jim? That's what you were looking for.
Is there better availability on, I always am biased against doing something on a Friday because a lot of people either don't work on Fridays, or sometimes you're better off, but it's just Fridays is one of those days, it's a transition day for a lot of people. Try to avoid Fridays.
Okay, so ideally you would like the 6th.
Well, is the main council room on 3rd floor available on the 6th?
Not 100% sure yet. They're still, but those were the tentative dates they gave that they think there's a.
So we're not under quorum requirements for doing this. It would be lovely if everybody, first of all, I want to tell you all, the attendance at this commission has been perfect attendance every time. I can't commend you all enough for being good on attendance. So I won't presume nobody is coming to these either, but is there any preference for 6th or 8th? Is there anybody says I can't possibly do it on the 6th or the 8th?
If we could do the 6th, the Wednesday, that'd be better.
I have more flexibility on the 6th. On the 8th, I have a class in the afternoon. And I'd rather.
So as a working person, my prerogatives are slightly different, and
Yeah.
Fridays turn out to be easier than middle of the week. I obviously don't need to do it around my availability, but that, if we're going to attract people who don't have the luxury of retirement, and that might be a consideration.
Okay.
I have the same problem as Dylan. It'll be harder for me on a Wednesday than on a Friday, but either way.
And I'm not 100% positive on this, but you should be able to access it virtually as well from the.
Oh, that's the other thing. Our commissioners have the ability to do this, even though we're having an in-person session, because we want people who aren't comfortable in the online environment to be able to come and testify if that's what they want to do. You all are welcome to participate electronically via Zoom, just like the public. So, and you will be recognized as a member of the commission for attending that way too. So, does that help you folks?
Personally, I'd much rather be there in person to get a sense of the room.
Right.
And whatever the commission puts on, I will, be happy with. But my preference slightly differs. just because Fridays are easier than Wednesdays for me.
And I haven't seen the 7th floor room, but the staff think is, the 3rd floor room has all the technology. Are we better off in the 3rd floor in the main room than we are in the 7th floor?
Yes, it's all just about.
It's,
I put in the preference that it be.
yeah, that's a wonderful room for technology and
Yes.
getting it done.
But yeah, the 7th floor, it does have I imagine has the capabilities and everything. Definitely gonna be better on the 3rd floor. The last thing with it is, I know you really want to stream live. And I'm working with the communications team on being able to do that. I can't promise that we are going to be able to stream it live.
Live.
There's budget issues doing so. We will be able to have it recorded and available public like these are online after it wraps up. If we can get it live, great, but I just.
Well, what's the difference between a Zoom meeting and a streaming meeting?
So they would all be, if it's streamed, they would have the Zoom aspect of people being able to call in and then they'd be on a screen, which would be part of the live stream. So it'd be having basically a camera in that corner seeing everything that's live.
There's a security issue. If you Zoom, people get a link and they get to use the link to access it, and so they're part of your meeting. And you could cut them off and you could some control, but you don't have total control. I've been in public meetings where people Zoom bomb you and you get undesirable effects. Streaming is like, I'm watching it on TV, I'm watching it on the internet, on a YouTube channel. I can see it, but I'm not in that meeting. I'm not in that room. I can't affect what's going on.
If I say something, no one else hears it.
You're just watching on TV, actually.
Jim, you can lock down the security of a Zoom as well. You can have a Zoom webinar, which is exactly the exact same thing.
Okay,
And the comms team will be able to
so.
do all of that.
So, okay, so tell me then, so is there a reason why we can't? And you heard a budget issue, which I don't understand, but is there a reason why there wouldn't be live public access? If we could do it by Zoom in the same way?
So anybody will be able to join via the Zoom and watch. It's more of a like live on YouTube.
It's just a registration thing, right? If it's on YouTube, they just come on. If you do it Zoom, they actually have to register. You have to send them the link.
Yeah.
There's a little bit.
The link could be public
just
and
hard.
yeah, and everything would be public about the Zoom for people to join in. So that would be.
Could the link be published on the same website that announces it? So they don't have to there doesn't have to be a back and forth?
Yeah.
That would be fine.
Just like we do with these meetings.
Okay.
Jim, I apologize. I'm going to have to drop off because of
Okay.
time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One other logistical thing with the streaming is we have to have, the communications office has to have a dedicated staff person who manages the stream. Because I mean, you have cameras and you have, there's actually somebody who does that.
Okay, well, I trust you folks will do it.
I'm
Best way possible.
gonna work with them as fast as we can to.
Okay.
Well, the other aspect of Zoom is chat.
Yep.
And are we making a commitment that we will respond to chats?
We would not. That would be,
You should actually disable.
yeah, they'll probably disable the chat. Because then you just have almost chaos. And then for the virtual Zoom one, I will set that up through this account, whatever date you pick. I'd mentioned to Jim earlier, I know the agenda says 6 to 7:30 PM of having a later nighttime virtual Zoom. So I believe just based on past ones, you would get a better turnout than if you have it from 6 to 7:30. You got people eating dinner, putting their kids to bed. Just based on past listening sessions, I would suggest later.
Let's focus. I agree with what he's saying. My experience is seven's a pretty good. I don't want to 7:30. By the time you start at 7:30, it means you're running till 9 and people are like, they're half asleep at that point and they're tired. They worked all day. They got up at 6:15 in the morning. So 7 works for me. Anybody?
7 is the best.
Okay, and once I pick a date, I'll get that set up.
Okay, so for the online session,
So this is Wednesday the 6th?
So the Wednesday the 6th is the.
Wednesday the
if they can
6th,
get it.
Wednesday the 6th would be in person. Okay, if they can get the room, if not, we're gonna go to the 8th.
Is that 2 to 3:30? Or are
Yes.
we changing the time?
No, 2 to 3:30 is the in-person, because the idea is it's live in the office building during staff hours where they can man the equipment and everybody's happy. And it's a work day and we're trying to do one at night and one in the day. We don't know what people.
I'm confused. We're having two meetings?
So let's talk about that's the in-person. Let's talk about the virtuals online.
Okay, so the 7 p.m. on the 6th, that's live.
No,
No.
the 6th would be 2:00.
That's 2 o'clock. Okay.
Which we haven't picked the date yet for the,
Well, why can't we do both on the same day?
I'm gonna have to ask staff whether that could be done.
Yeah, just
Part of it
all
is
on
a
the
long
6th.
day. Is that,
Two sessions.
I mean, did you have any
You don't need to
preferred
do that.
date
There's no
to start with?
Well, whichever day that we do at 7 o'clock is gonna be a long day for that, on that day for somebody.
I mean, I should probably need to be the only staff on the virtual ones, and I'm more than happy if it's both on the same day. That's not a problem. I'll be running it from home, so.
Did you have another date in mind?
Either.
So the folks who had a problem with the 6th in the afternoon, how do you feel about the 6th in the evening? One of them still, I forget who was this, was it Jeffrey?
Dylan left.
Yeah,
Dylan's
Yeah,
gone.
Dylan.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm looking at my calendar. Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I teach the SHRM certification course on Wednesday nights. And if I'm teaching that night, obviously I'm not going to be at any kind of meeting. So just give me a second while I pull up my calendar.
Yeah, is there an advantage to staggering the dates? So maybe the Zoom meeting should be Friday?
I just don't know if you do a Friday night, if you do it, you say Friday at 7, whether you get a lot of
Yeah.
public voting. Like, seriously, that's what you think is effectively the reason?
Sorry, I'm missing this. You saying there's one meeting that's only going to be a Zoom meeting?
One meeting it's online, anybody who wants to participate online, doesn't have to drive to Rockville, doesn't have to show up here, it just, anybody who wants
To
to
the
talk,
commission, but for,
everybody
to
can.
take testimony.
Yeah.
I'm available that night if need be.
Okay, and another meeting will be in person
So people who are not comfortable in the Zoom context can come in person,
on 2 different days,
where we're just trying to
or
decide
at 2 different times, okay?
different times.
Yeah.
And again, this virtual meeting will be recorded like these all are. If someone's not able to be there, they'll be able to go back through and watch. And refer back to any testimony later on as you all make your decision.
All right.
Yeah, I'm open that week.
Well, it sounds like we could do Wednesday this at 7 o'clock. And it is a long day. I mean, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm fine
And
with
that's the
it.
in-person,
Both. We're talking about doing both on that day.
right, but I mean, the 7 o'clock is the
The
in-person.
virtual,
7
no,
o'clock
7
would
o'clock's
be
virtual.
Virtual. 7 o'clock
7
would
o'clock is
be,
virtual.
7 o'clock would be virtual for people who are home and enjoying their dinner and want to
And so the earlier in the day would be in person.
daytime during business.
Correct.
That would be what, 2?
2 o'clock. We had picked at 2 o'clock post lunch.
For those who care for, like naps, you could, after the 3:30, you can, do a quick nap.
Looking at me like it's me.
Sorry, just a couple other notes. I should be able to set up signups through the county website, the calendar where they sign up for public hearings and that. Again, just have to work with the legislative information office to get it set up, but I remember doing that in the past, so we should have an idea of how many people are coming. And who is like, I'm sure you could accommodate people that don't sign up, but you would have at least a general
I did.
idea, and then if you could also do it if it runs beyond the 90 minutes, that the people that signed up go first and that kind of thing. And if there's time for people that didn't, it gives you options on that. We'd be able to put the links in that the press release for people to sign up just directly through that. I think we can have it sent out from the social media accounts, but I don't want to promise that. But I don't see a problem of the comms office releasing the memo through Twitter.
But I'm not getting some, why can't we have just one meeting with the people showing up in person and anyone wanting to be virtual could be virtual?
I guess the question is whether or not it's a different opportunity to attend. I mean, I'm fine.
Different times.
I think part of it is the times. You're going to get more participation if you give some people the option not to do it during work hours. And you're going to get better participation if you give them more options. it just seems if you have one session and only one session, it's sort of, you either can make it then or you're just done.
Well, then make it 7 o'clock and in person and virtual for anyone who wants to be virtual or vice versa. But I don't see why.
You don't think we need 2 sessions?
No,
I think we want to give as much opportunity as
That
possible.
doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
I'm sorry,
No, I agree. I think maximum exposure, maximum.
Yeah.
Two times is the minimum. I think we ought to do one in the afternoon and one in the evening.
so Marvin and Jeffrey are with the original plan, Howard is, we prefer just one. Anybody else feel strongly?
Well, a question, for the Zoom virtual session, would we still want to have someone in the council building? Sort of in a formal setting where they have the flag or whatever behind them, so that they are
I
somehow.
know who that person's gonna be. I'm not too crazy about the idea. I don't think we need that. I think people are used to Zoom sessions.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah, and then you're gonna have. This
I promised to filter my
Secure,
back.
so then you're gonna have a security, have to have a security.
it's a security thing.
Okay.
Anything else I didn't cover that you'd want me to cover? I think, just looking at the agenda, I'm hoping I went through everything.
No, I'm good. We're kind of at our bewitching hour here. I just have one quick question. Can staff send us by email any public comments that were received at our email box? I get a personal phone call from someone who submitted one, so I know we have one.
When they submitted, I checked on Friday, and there was nothing. I'll check right after this and send anything out.
Well, we did have an email that I received. a
Yeah, we
copy
got
of.
3. We originally received 3 last month, and I was told in the interim there was one more.
Yeah, I'll check again. I checked late last week, I think Thursday or Friday. And I sent one out from that box. It probably came from the charter review box, but yeah, I sent it out to the entire, I think that was a couple weeks ago. But yes, I'll check that.
And it was, and I will tell you, the person who called me was somebody who had felt strongly about the filling of vacancies through special elections, the issue that we're not gonna touch, so I'm not too worried about that comment, right?
I don't know if it is in the press release, but you could put that email address for people that aren't able to make, okay,
It is.
aren't able to make the testify.
Right. So it's not gonna be Teams, or are you gonna use Teams?
Zoom.
It will be Zoom.
Zoom, okay. So 2 o'clock is in person
Correct.
and 7 o'clock is virtual.
Correct.
But even for the 2 o'clock, if someone needs to stay home, they can. And
Right. So they have the option of calling in or talking virtually at 2 o'clock.
Right.
Correct.
We know, and I guess we'll know in advance how many people will have virtual. It might not be any, they might want to all
We
talk
might.
at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, maybe. If we don't have anybody, we'll,
My guess is that people want to do it in the afternoon.
if they're working, it depends on their work schedules. Okay. So we're well past our time. I'm going to ask if anybody has last call before I ask motion to adjourn. Move. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Anyone unopposed? We are adjourned.
thank you.
Thank you.